What's your favorite Advent song? If you think about it, there aren't a whole lot. There are lots of Christmas songs and hymns, Joy to the World, Hark the Herald, As Shepherds Wash Their Socks, and you may even get a verse or two that are Advent themed, like the first verse of Come Thou Long Expected Jesus. But as I thought about it, O Come, Emmanuel is one of the few that is really Advent-y. It's all longing and expectation without necessarily the resolution of Christ's birth. And there's another hymn that shares this expression of intense longing and hope, but it's not normally thought of as an Advent hymn, although it totally should be. Are you familiar with On Jordan's Stormy Bank? The first verse says, On Jordan's stormy bank I stand, and cast a wishful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land, where my possessions lie. Now, if you're tracking with this series and reading up on some of the background for the people we've talked about, then you know that the land of Canaan was the land God promised to Abraham. And by faith, Abraham traveled there with his family and lived as a foreigner, awaiting God's promise. Hebrews 11:13-16 remind us that Abraham and Sarah, and all the folks we've talked about so far, were living by faith. They were hoping that God would keep his promises, even though it might not happen in their lifetime. So let me read these verses for us. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. What a great summary of the Advent season. We live by faith, even till death, looking forward to God's promised kingdom, the heavenly city. Now, as I read this verse and reread it, a line popped out to me that needed some more thought. In verse 13, it said, they did not receive the things promised. We saw yesterday that Abraham and Sarah did see one promise at least being kept, the birth of Isaac, their son. If you look back, you can see how many of the people we're talking about did receive something. Noah saw God clear away the floodwaters and provide for him and his family. Enoch never died. So what's up with the author saying that they didn't receive the things promised? Well, the next phrase helped me at least understand what was going on. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. With the exception of Enoch, who is admittedly a bit of an extraordinary case, the promises that were kept were not the full promises being made. In fact, the promises that were kept were gifts from God that strengthened and confirmed the faith of those folks, especially Abraham and Sarah. They arrived in Canaan and gave birth to Isaac, but they did not see the great nation and the extent of blessing that God had promised. They saw that God was faithful, and they held on in faith, the confidence of things hoped for. We are also called to live out this faith, even as we have seen more of God's promises being kept. We have seen how God worked to bring about blessings, the defeat of sin, the solution to pain and brokenness. And we can read in the Bible and see Jesus, how Jesus, God with us, came to bring redemption and salvation for all peoples at all times. And we long, or at least I long, for it to be made fully complete, for the promised heavenly home and the return of Jesus as King. Verse 16 offers up a great hope that God does see our longing. God sees us living by faith, and as we walk in faith towards the kingdom of God, he is preparing a city for us. He is not ashamed to be our God. What a joy to hear, especially when we remember that this is said about Abraham and Sarah, who doubted and even laughed at God's plan. So we too can join in the hope and longing as we share a faith in a kind God. So sing in expectation of the promised land this Advent season.
When shall I reach that happy place and be forever blessed? When shall I see my Father
And note, if you like that melody and want a little bit more explicitly Advent and Christmas themes to go with it, check out the link in the video description. I've arranged an old Advent hymn on Jordan's Bank, the Baptist Cry, to go to this tune and share that great refrain of being bound for the Promised Land. So go ahead and check it out and enjoy.